This is lesson 2.1 on economic systems, answering the 3 economic questions. An economic system is a method by which societies produce and distribute goods and services. In order to determine what type of economic system a country has, they have to answer 3 questions. The 3 key economic questions. Every society that's ever existed has had to answer 3 basic questions. No, there's no written test, there's no form to fill out and turn in, but still you have to answer the questions. And the way that a society answers these questions determines the economic system that they have, and also has a lot to do with the standard of living of the people living in that economy. So here are the 3 economics questions. Number 1, what goods and services should be produced? 2, how should these goods and services be produced? And 3, who's going to consume these goods and services? Many times I'll talk to students and I'll tell them the questions are, what are we going to make? How are we going to make it? And who's going to get it? Every society has to answer these questions. And the way that 2 societies or 3 societies answer these questions may be very, very different, but it's based on their beliefs, their values, their traditions. What's important to you? That's the way we answer those questions. The way a society answers the big 3 questions is determined by their goals. What's important to them? There are many economic goals around the world. We're going to go through some of the most common here, and I'll explain them briefly. The first one is economic efficiency. We're going to do more on this in just a second, but let me just say that economic efficiency means that we're getting the most goods and services that we can out of the resources that we have, that we're wasting nothing. Economic freedom. We'll also talk about this in just a minute. Your money, your life, your property, you do with it as you please. There was a time when, ladies, if you had a husband and you had small children and your husband was killed in some kind of a factory accident, they would just replace him and you would have nothing. There were no government programs. You would go to churches, you would go to family, you would go to friends to look for help. There wasn't much of anything coming from the government. One of the goals of modern economies often is economic security. What's going to happen to people when they're old and they can no longer work? We have programs like Social Security. We have programs like unemployment for people that have lost their jobs through no fault of their own, just perhaps due to a downturn in the economy. What happens to people that were never able to work, that they have chronic health problems and they're bedridden? Well, we have programs that are designed to help those people that have medical needs and health needs of other kinds. So that's economic security. Predictability is the idea that it's not saying that prices will never go up, but that price increases, changes in the economy, they're going to be slow and they're going to be predictable. The opposite of economic predictability is something like runaway inflation, like what happened in Germany after World War I. Economic equity. This is one we'll talk about as well. But it's the idea that people in a society, their incomes are more evened out. You don't have super rich and super poor people. We try to spread income out. Economic growth and innovation. This is a goal of almost every society. Economic growth means that our economy is producing more goods and services than it has in the past, and that we're producing more income for the people. This is a goal everybody wants, but often it's tough to achieve. Full employment. Full employment does not mean that every single man, woman, and child has a job. It means that everyone who can work and wants to work can find employment. That's what full employment is. So let's look in depth at some of these economic goals and talk about what we mean when we talk about these goals. The first one is economic efficiency. Efficiency means that we are producing the most goods and services that our economy, our society can produce, and that nothing is being wasted. Another way of saying it is that efficiency is achieved when a society is able to get the greatest amount of satisfaction available from the resources that they have. There's no way, if we're operating efficiently, that we can change the way that we're doing anything and increase the total amount of satisfaction obtained by a society. So what are some things that would be inefficient? Look at the picture. Probably some of you have grown up with parents like mine, and it was always turn the lights out. When you leave a room, turn the lights out. Don't leave the faucet dripping. Don't waste anything. Make sure that you use all the ketchup out of the ketchup bottle, right? All of these things, that's the idea of efficiency, is that we're using whatever resources we have to obtain the most that we possibly can from those resources. Economic equity is a goal of some societies, but it's a tough goal to achieve. Economic equity tries to smooth out the big differences between the rich and the poor. Almost everybody wants to have a fair distribution of money and goods in a society, but the problem is that fair is a very elusive concept. It's very difficult to get a hold of and hold on to because everybody has a different idea of what's fair in a situation. If everybody has the same opportunity to make money and go to school and all that, then that's fair to some. Others, it's not fair unless everybody has the same outcome. It's not fair to some people that doctors make maybe $150,000 a year and people that are, high school dropouts or something are making so much less. Some people believe that the only way that society can achieve an equitable distribution of income is for the government to do it. They call it redistribution of wealth. The government takes money from people that have earned it, people that have lots of money, and they turn around and redistribute it to people who have less. This is a very controversial thing because not everybody views economic equity as the best goal. Another goal of some societies is economic freedom. It's your money, it's your property, your life, your skills, your abilities. Go out and do with them what you want. It's all about voluntary choice, voluntary exchanges, and freedom. We can't achieve all of the goals that we have for a society. Some economic goals work well together, others conflict. When we look at goals that complement one another, we can see things like economic freedom and economic growth and innovation working in the same direction. Economic security and full employment are complementary goals as well. Other economic goals conflict with one another. Economic freedom and economic equity are not compatible goals. You can't say on the one hand, it's your life, your property, your talent, your money, you do with it what you want, and then also say, well, we're going to take money away from you and we're going to redistribute it to people who earn less. Those goals don't really go together. Societies have to determine what goals are priorities and which ones are going to take a back seat. We can't have every goal because they often don't work well together. So we go after those goals that are most important and we think benefit society most. In a traditional economy, what we make, how we make it, and who's going to get it, those questions are always answered the same way. We're going to make what we've always made, we're going to make it the same way we've always made it, and we're going to distribute it along the way that we always have. Tradition and custom plays a big role in traditional economies. If you think about the Indians that lived on the Great Plains for generations, many of these Indian tribes, their lives didn't change much over the generations. They did what their parents did, their grandparents or great-grandparents before it. Everything was dictated by custom and tradition. And if you had an economy, let's say like the Plains Indian, where they followed along and hunted the buffalo, that was their economy. It was the way that they all lived. They learned it from their parents and grandparents before them, and they carried it on. More modern version might be like some of the Amish societies, where the people that build furniture and put up houses and farm, They do things the way that they have for generations. There's not a lot of change, not a lot of innovation in a traditional economy. And as a result, there's not a lot of traditional economies left in the world. In a command economy, the government answers the three big economic questions. What are we going to make? We're going to make what the government wants us to make. How are we going to make it? We're going to make it the way that the government tells us to make it. And who's going to get these things? Well, the people that get them, it'll be the ones that the government says should get it. You see the key? Government, government, government. Now, they might say, they're doing all of this on behalf of the people, but don't be fooled. It's government control of the economy. In a command economy, also known as a centrally planned economy, they determine such things as what's going to be made, what the prices are going to charge, what the workers are going to make. All of those kinds of things are government decisions, and the workers themselves, the citizens, they have very little, if any, input into the decisions about their lives and their country's economic life. If we look at modern examples of command economies, we can look at places like Cuba, or perhaps the most extreme form of command economy, North Korea. Obviously, the Soviet Union and its satellite nations were historical examples of command economies. Before we get into market economies, let's define a few terms. First of all, a market is any place that buyers and sellers come together to make trades. A market economy is also known as a free market economy. Sometimes it's referred to as free enterprise, and you've all heard it referred to as capitalism. When we use those terms in class, we're pretty much using them to mean the same thing. So, how do we answer the questions in a free market economy? What are we going to make? Well, think about it. What products are made in the marketplace? What do companies produce? What do stores put on their shelves? They make and they sell those things that they think that people want to buy. How do we determine what's going to be made? We look at how people spend their money. How people spend their money tells us a lot about what they want. When they start buying a lot of something, we know that's a popular product. They vote with their dollars. Sometimes we use the term dollar votes. When people stop buying something, producers are going to stop producing it because they don't want to make things that people don't want to buy. The other question is, how are we going to make those goods and services that are produced in the marketplace? In a free market economy, the answer is pretty simple, and that is, we're going to produce these goods and services using the least costly method of manufacturing. Why do we say that? In most fields, there's a great deal of competition for the consumer's dollars. And as a result of that competition, there's always competition to try to find a way to lower the price of your product and increase your profit. And one way to do that is by trying to find a way to produce your product cheaper than you have in the past. If we're looking at who gets what in a free market society, well, I think you know the answer to that. It's the people who want the product and have the ability to pay for it. We don't actually have a demand for something if we can't afford it. So how is it determined who gets certain models of cars? Well, it's by the people who spend their money on those cars. That's how it's determined. If we look at free market economies, the United States and Singapore and Japan are identified as market economies, and prices play a very important role in guiding economic activity. When we look at the two big economic systems in the world, market economies and command economies, well, there are no pure market economies. There are no pure command economies. All economies have some measure of market-based transactions, and they have some measure of government control. In America, there's a lot of disagreement among people about how much the government should do, how much the government should interfere in the marketplace. But I don't know anybody that when their child is sick, they want to go to the drugstore and have to worry about the fact that the baby medicine that they're getting, the aspirin, the cold medicine, that is going to be harmful. We want to make sure that the government takes some measure in protecting consumers. But the question is, how far do they go? Even in very strict economies, like the command economy of North Korea, there are some market-based transactions, and we'll see this later in class. They may be very secretive, they may be relatively rare, but they exist, and they supply people in those countries with things that they otherwise probably wouldn't get. Here's a table showing the differences between traditional economies, command economies, market economies, and then a little bit of information on mixed economies. You have 4 minutes to copy the table down onto your paper. You will need this information going forward, so please take the time to copy it down. The key point that you have to remember is that every individual and every society has to confront the problem of scarcity. Every society, regardless of its political structure, has to develop an economic system to determine how it's going to use its limited resources, to answer the 3 basic questions of what are we going to make, how are we going to make it, and who's going to get it.